We're entering a crucial week for Bitcoin. Today is Monday, July 13th, and we're going to look at the price movement forecast for Bitcoin for this week. Also, I'm going to give you an example, and I've mentioned this before, of how hockey, or trying to understand hockey, can give you the key to always investing successfully in intraday trading, scalping, or even for the week in a very favorable way. At the end of the video, we're going to look at the July challenge, which is by far the easiest way to make money trading if you're new. I'm Mikel Vasquez, and after 15 years in professional trading, I can tell you that no indicator by itself is reliable. Everything is manipulating. The price, the indicators. The only thing that works is to look for what the people who manipulate the market are doing. In other words, the market doesn't move the way you might think based on supply or demand. Instead, there are institutions, big players, whales, whatever you want to call them, in every market. Right now we're talking about Bitcoin, and they move the price however they want. And what they do is grab the liquidity, in other words, the money from retail traders, regular people like you or me. They take your money by manipulating, like I said, the indicators, and in the end, they make their profit. And we're going to look at price movements by understanding those manipulations. All right. So let's get right to the chart. And as you already know, we look for the institutions. We look for them using volume, but you always have to include price action because it's like the map through which any asset is going to move. There's a map that is followed, and then the direction, the path that the price takes on that map, we determine with volume. All right, supports and resistances. We're in the channel from 60,000 to, let's say, 68,000, 69,000. That's the important channel over this past month. As you can see, the price swings from the top to the bottom, always the same way. Right now, we're right in the middle of the channel, and that's why I'm telling you this is a decisive week. Because what we've seen, if you watch my videos over the weekend, I post updates every day, even on weekends, it's because we can't afford to miss the clues left by the big players. I told you it would probably drop down a bit to catch its breath, to gain a little strength for the move. But now we're already waiting for that price to reach the upper area of the channel. That is, more than 64,000. Between 64,000 and 68,000 is what we're going to start expecting this week, unless a key move in the opposite direction appears, which is determined by the volume. But we'll get into that later. As always, let's bring up the Wyckoff phase. If these terms sound a bit new to you, I've designed a course that takes you from zero all the way to understanding the chart, which isn't complicated, I'm telling you, how I understand it and how to create strategies both in mark up, mark down, accumulation, distribution. It's a course where I've given you a really significant discount, and I've left the link in the description. You'll understand everything from scratch, up to how I read the chart. All right, we're in the accumulation phase in the long term. We're waiting for a markup, which means the price goes up, but so far there hasn't been any sign indicating that this accumulation is going to break just yet. With that in mind, what we do is move into smaller time frames. What I was telling you about hockey means that if we're in a phase, for example, in a markup or a markdown, there can be one of those in smaller phases. Even if we're in accumulation in a larger phase, like now, a weekly candle for example, markups can be included within this accumulation phase in smaller time frames. What I mean is that if we are, for example, like we were last month, in a markdown, it means that, like a hockey stick, the trend in all the smaller time frames compared to the one we're in will always have a downward trend. In other words, if we did nothing, the price would always go down. With that in mind, we start narrowing down the time frame, and that way we'll enter in a more appropriate way. That is, if we were in that markdown, we should always go short. In other words, understand that the price is going to drop, never go long, because there could be a pullback. We have to be very sure before entering on a pullback because it can reverse and we could end up stuck for a long time or simply have to close a position at a loss. And that's not what we want to do in trading. You know, if what you want is to make some money or be a professional trader, it's not about knowing a lot of indicators or a bunch of techniques. No, it's about making money. That's what it means to be a professional trader, and that's what we're doing on this channel. All right, now we're on the 4-hour chart. I've switched it. Now each candle represents 4 hours, and this is the headquarters where we look at the movement and make our forecast for this week. Now we're seeing what I mentioned about taking a breather and a reversal element appears, like this wick. Normally, more wicks appear in a row when it's a major reversal, but since this is in the middle of the channel, it hasn't been much. Even though it dropped overnight, it wasn't much. This wick is enough if volume shows up to reverse the price direction. And that's exactly what we're seeing. These are two elements that aren't very clear. For example, at that moment, we did see a clearer move to send it back to the middle of the channel. See? A lot of volume, one much clearer wick. Now it's not as clear, but the move is definitely heading in that direction because there's a trend toward that area. All right, what we're going to wait for, July 13th, we'll start hitting the middle of the channel again and then break through it. And the retest from above, which we've been waiting for since the end of last week. You already know that time in trading doesn't work the same way it does for people. We say we're going to do something and we just do it. But in trading, signals show up and it can take quite a few candles for the move to appear. But in a very high percentage of cases, it does show up. We've set the forecast, which is to wait for the price in this area. The thing about the big players, which I told you is the most important, shows up on time frames like, for example, the 4-hour chart with a volume of 1.5. That is, when a volume spike appears. Sometimes, when there's less activity, a spike of this size that doesn't even reach 1 billion is already enough to understand that there are big players involved, because as you've seen, the weekend was really slow. I've also told you this before, and I insist because I want it to be clear, that in the Bitcoin market, even though it's open 24/7, there are basically two phases. There's a weekend phase and a weekday phase. Right now, we're in the weekday phase, which started last night, Spanish time. It runs from Sunday night to Friday afternoon. And then there's the weekend phase, when the price moves much more slowly, and you see wicks because a little bit of volume can push the price sharply in other direction. And that goes from Friday afternoon until Sunday night. Sunday night means around midnight or 1 in the morning, Spanish time. All right, we've set that forecast because these elements are telling us that first, it's going to return to the middle of the channel and then try to break through it. Tomorrow, I'll upload another video to look at those clues. Unless we see strong hands coming in with a volume of 1.5, pushing the price close to 60,000. 60,000 has always been a very important barrier. Ever since February, if you remember that selling climax, it held the 60,000 barrier perfectly. We understand that 60,000 is a support level. We could even call it an absolute support. If it breaks, we would be entering a new phase for Bitcoin. We'll analyze that when the time comes, but for now, that's not our forecast. All right, what I was saying about hockey, we can use that now. For example, we're seeing an upward price trend. We can use this on the 30-minute or 15-minute charts for scalping or intraday trading. That is, as long as this trend exists on the 4-hour chart, the best way to make money scalping or intraday is to always go long as soon as the signals appear. The signals, as we've seen on the 4-hour chart, are when wicks start to appear. Maybe a doji shows up and the strong hands start to come in. Strong hands are a spike, and usually that's what turns the price around. When the price is very aggressive, they need to make several attempts. For example, in this case, we saw a very clear doji here, which is indicating a change in direction. But that wasn't the case. Instead, it was just an attempt to slow down that momentum. Like I was saying, in hockey, when the puck comes in really fast and you hit it the first time, you don't stop it right away. Instead, it moves your stick, and the puck keeps going in the same direction, but much slower. And then, with the second hit, that's when you actually manage to turn it around. Well, that's exactly what we're seeing here. That's why, many times, we don't just see a single accumulation phase, markup, or distribution phase, but instead, we see a double accumulation phase or a double distribution phase. That's because of the strength of the movement. Very good. We've set up the best ways to enter. Anyway, if what you like is scalping or intraday trading, in my VIP Telegram group, I post 2 trades every day, my 2 trades that I make in Bitcoin, and I tell you the time I enter, the asset, which is Bitcoin, and the direction, meaning whether it's short or long. And then I'll let you know when I exit the trade. I'll leave the link in the description. There's also, alongside this VIP group, a discussion group where the people in the VIP share their experiences, how they see the chart, and honestly, there are some really interesting opinions. All right, so let's wrap up today's video. I'm also going to tell you about the July challenge, which was the easiest way to make money in trading. Also, for those of you who follow me, I wanted to let you know that next week I'm going on vacation for a few days to Mundaka, Bermeo, and I'm not sure how I'll manage. Maybe I'll skip a video one day, or the signals. I won't be given the VIP signals anymore. I'll let you know about it anyway. All right, let's get to the July challenge. I started on July 1st with $500 on Mexi.com. What I do is make micro trades every day. Right now it's at $20, but I started with $15, always going with the trend. When I see a clear movement, I get in, often using the signals I give in the VIP Telegram, and the take profit is really quick. Sometimes just minutes, sometimes it takes a bit longer. And without trying to do anything fancy, it's just $15 or $20 every day to see how that account ends up. Currently, we have the TP account. I'm also going to show you yesterday's trade at $745. As you can see, for yesterday's trade, I set the leverage at 10, set the take profit at $20, and wait for MEXC to send me the take profit execution. Here, they sent it to me. And what I do is, whatever I end up with in July, for example, in June, the profit was only $227. This month, it looks like we're doing better. Whatever I earn, I'll raffle off among all of you who sign up on the exchange where I do all my trades and where I set the reference prices, which is MEXC.com. Make your first deposit and you'll be entered into the raffle for whatever I earn. That is the amount over 500. Right now, that would be $245, but let's hope we end up much, much higher. I'm Mikel Vasquez. This is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. See you tomorrow. We're in that mid-channel phase, and we need to figure out what's going to happen. See ya.